Grammar Girl here. I'm Mignon Fogarty, and I'm here today with a very special guest, Anne Lamott, author of 10 New York Times bestselling books, California Hall of Fame inductee, and Guggenheim Fellowship recipient. She wrote both the beloved writing book, Bird by Bird, and the influential book about motherhood called Operating Instructions, along with obviously other books. She's known for her wisdom that makes a real difference in people's lives with respect to writing and beyond. I mean, I asked on social media what people wanted to know about her, and people just gushed with praise. One person
Oh,
said, "Tell her I swim in public, carefree and content and thankful because of her." Another one said, "Does she know how many women often whisper to ourselves, 'No' is a complete sentence?" And the third person said, "Tell her I think about her every time I make toast." So, Anne, you have obviously made quite an impression on the world. Welcome to the Grammar Girl podcast.
oh, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, well, your son, Sam, listens to the podcast and he got in touch with me and said you're doing this really interesting writing retreat called Writers Rising, and it's in late October. And what intrigued me most is he said that it's based on sort of the concepts of recovery. And I wanted to hear, like, tell me how your writing retreat works.
Well, we've done two before. They're both online and in person. This one's in LA, so I can speak from the in-person ones that I've done, but they work because it's a very weird and lonely thing to spend your time doing, writing. You probably know that as well as anyone. And you get so many bad voices in your head that say, well, do you have an agent? Or, how many times have you been rejected? Or this isn't going anywhere. Or in my case, with this new book, boy, talk about beating a dead horse. But when you get together with several hundred people, they're all hearing those same voices too, and they're still getting their work done. There's a famous line in recovery that the whole system works because we're not all nuts on the same day. And so, if, 5 or 600 people, if they each get like a few numbers, 5 or 10 numbers of people that they really bonded with, and they call around, somebody's going to have confidence that day. And somebody else, like you might say to me, oh, I know exactly how you feel. I was there on Monday and this is what I did. And I tried this first, it never works. And, but what I did instead was I went to a writing room and I just did the prompt. I just let myself get away with just doing the prompt. And then I was off and running again. So that's really a major reason why these collectives work. And also, it's so happy to be in community. It's so fun, and also laughter. People laughing about their predicaments in writing. And I've always said laughter is carbonated holiness, and you go from you know gripping your pencil too tightly and putting stuff aside and thinking it's no good and whatever, to getting your sense of humor back. And when you get your sense of humor back, you're home free, and then you just start writing again. Also, when I teach at these writing, this two we've done and third coming up, I just basically rehash Bird by Bird,
Mhm.
because everything springs from shitty first drafts, and people don't quite believe it. They believe that writers they love write well and know what they're doing. And that's just not true of any writer I've ever known or who I'd ever want to sit next to at the dinner table. And the other thing is that every writer I know is writing bird by bird, or whatever they might call it, like one passage at a time, or one scene at a time, one segment of dialogue, one memory, one whatever. So it's kind of like the liturgy. It's good to just be reminded that if you do a few simple things, you're going to be able to get that day's work done.
Can you tell the background story of Bird by Bird for people who don't know it?
Oh, sure. Well, my older brother, John, who's 2 years older, was a terrible student. And in the fourth grade curriculum in Northern California, where are you, by the way, right now?
Oh, I'm in the Central California coast.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
in our area, Northern California, fourth grade, you wrote a research paper. Because third grade, remember, they'd give you the paper and there'd still be a space for for your illustration, and
Yeah.
then there'd be the lines below for your story. Well, in fourth grade, you learned to do a research paper. And in our area, this batch of Northern California, it was the first one was on this on our capital, Sacramento, and the second one was on birds. And you had the whole semester to research and then write about birds. And my older brother hadn't started on the weekend before it was due. He'd had 5 months. And my brother was a tough guy, but he was in tears. And my dad, who was a writer, sat down with him and said, just take it bird by bird. Read, we had Audubon and Roger Troy Peterson, just read a little bit about chickadees and then tell me about them in your own voice. Okay, and then you have a picture here you can either cut out or provide, and let me know when that's done. And then we're going to move on to herons and to great blue herons. And all you're going to do is sort of immerse yourself in them and then write about them in your own voice. And I'm 70 now, and that's still all I'm doing. I'm immersing myself in topics and ideas, and and then I'm telling them in my own voice. So I always just thought, well, it's bird by bird. Can I just add another quote that I love that I know
Sure.
you're familiar with, but it's that great line of E.L. Doctorow's, who happens to be one of my favorite novelists. And he said, excuse me, about 30 years ago, he said, writing is like driving at night with the headlights on. You can only see a little ways in front of you, but you can make the whole journey that way. And that
Hmm.
is probably about writing in life the truest thing I've ever heard. But we
Yeah.
think we should know what we're doing. We should think we should know what we're going to pass along the way, what we're going to accomplish, what our feelings are going to be as no, it's not. You can see a few feet in front of you and you can make the whole journey that way. You just keep capturing what you can see.
It's so powerful. I wanted to talk to you about that, about the first drafts, because I know you say like everyone, all their first drafts are bad. And no matter how many times I hear it, I never believe it. I think
Mm,
that everyone else must be at least better on their
I
first
know.
drafts than mine.
Mhm.
Why are they always so bad?
I don't know. I think it's just the nature of writing. I think of very few people like you're too young to know very probably Muriel Spark, but she wrote The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie and she wrote Memento Mori. And she was a very big English writer during World War II. And all of us early feminists were reading her. She was so religiously plugged in that she said like she was just taking dictation with headphones on. But that always struck me as being just like really angry, and and I never heard anyone else reiterate that. But it just seems to be the way that we come to have our creative visions captured. It's kind of ephemeral. It's in our head. It doesn't exist. Maybe we have memories. Maybe we're writing fiction and we don't. And we just have to trust that. Well, I can trust, and especially when I'm in retreats and groups of writers, if you ask around, everyone will say, yeah, me too. And there's also that very critical voice. There's a whole chapter in Bird by Bird about perfectionism, and that it's the voice of the oppressor, and it'll keep you crazy your whole life. And a lot of us were raised by very high achieving parents. I certainly was. And you were supposed to know what you were doing, and you're supposed to do it really, really well. Like I was 35 when somebody told me that a B plus was a good grade. I'd never heard that in my life. Like if we brought home an A minus, we had to have little discussions about it. Like, was there time to raise it to an A? And so and whatever the equivalent of that was in your family, you don't make mistakes, you don't make messes, and you do very, very well with everything you try. But writing won't collaborate with that approach. And so for me, it's required a lot of therapy and years in recovery. I've been sober for 38 years, and the encouragement to just break down the perfectionism and make more mistakes and more failures. But I published my 20th book in April, and I've been writing these essays for the Washington Post on being a little bit older.
Mhm.
Well, actually quite a lot older, but they're only 1,200 words. That's, I don't know, 5 manuscript pages, right? and they're terrible. They start off terrible, and they're some of the best writing I've ever done. And they start off at 7 and 8 pages and way too many details. And then all the desperation in me to get you to like me, to get you to think I'm extremely smart and insightful. And then I have to put in extra humor so that you won't think I'm a buzzkill. And then I have an incredibly shitty first draft, and I have to get it down to 11 or 1200 words. And I go through, I take out several things. I take out all the boring parts, which is often the descriptions. I take out the lies, and I take off all the show-offy overkill where I'm just trying too hard, to be literary. If it looks literary to me, I take it out.
Hmm. Oh, how long have you been teaching writing? When did you start?
Wow, let's see. I started when Sam was a baby. So that he's 35, so he was probably 33 years ago. I just started teaching at when he was an infant, I taught for a semester at UC Davis. I taught a graduate writing course, but there's a huge independent bookstore you may be aware of called Book Passage.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they had, yeah, they're still a great resource for writers, for anyone listening. Just go to bookpassage.com. They have a ton of online classes, mystery writers, conferences, travel writers, novels, romance, everything, how to help you get published. I mean, it's basically all the same stuff a writingroom.com is doing, but it's over time. You might sign up for 6 weeks instead of 3 days. So they offered me a gig teaching writing once a week, and I had about 50 students and a baby. So
That
the
was a
store,
lot.
I know, right? So the bookstore owner, Elaine Petricelli, was taking care of the baby. Well, 40 of them would have paid to be there, and then 10 would be kind of the riffraff, that i.e. my really good friend. So I'd let in for free. But and so I taught all the stuff that would end up being bird by bird. But what I really noticed, the most probably most important thing of all those years, I did it till Sam was 8 or till probably he was 9, and that was my main source of income until Bird by Bird came out. But the main thing was that people were forming writing groups, and they would like see somebody they liked or whose work they really liked or who had said something very insightful about their own work, and they would have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine with them, and then they would agree to meet next Thursday an hour before class and have finished work done. And that's how any writing collective works, whether you go to the local community college and there'll be writing groups there. You go to the local independent bookstore, you put up a sign, I'm going to start a writing group. There's 600 people at a writingroom.com. There's somebody that you put it online. Is anybody writing? Is anyone starting a novel? Does anyone want to meet with me every single Tuesday? And we would keep each other accountable, and we would read each other's work. You would have to produce. It's a very benevolent kind of kick in the butt. You have to give me 5 pages every week, no excuses. And I'm going to go over them. And I'm not going to say, oh my God, I don't think you're getting anywhere. I would imagine I've already accepted it, and I'm going to help you burnish it. I'm going to help you bring your writing up to the very highest level I can help you get to by doing all the obvious things. The beginning is never quite right. It's always kind of just clearing your throat, trying to get into the material. And the ending is always way past the point where it should end organically. I always go 2 pages longer. And you go through and you're saying, you just, look at all these adjectives, all these adverbs. You need to find stronger verbs, or, I'm going to circle just on one page your adverbs, take them out, write from your verb. And so that I have a group, I have 2 groups, but one in particular that have been meeting for over 30 years, every Thursday. And and 2 of them have gotten published, and really well published by big houses. And they still just keep showing up, and every so often they take someone else in. But that, is the most important thing I think I have to teach, besides shitty first drafts and bird by bird, is that get help. You deserve support. No one writes with, I have my husband and I have another friend, and I send them. I would never send anything to an editor without having them have a go at it, because they love my work, and they will criticize it where it needs to be criticized.
Yeah. I would wonder, how do you know when you get feedback, especially when you're new in a writing group, whether it's good feedback? Sometimes, I mean, I've gotten feedback that was contradictory on something I've written
Yeah,
from two
yeah.
different people. How do you discern what's the feedback that's useful to you?
Well, I think if it's harsh, it's not good feedback right off the bat. 'Cause there's no call for that, right? But,
Mm,
it's ultimately your book, and there's a chapter in Bird by Bird about called Broccoli, and it's about a great line that Mel Brooks said, 50 years ago on The 2,000-Year-Old Man. He said, "Listen to your broccoli, and your broccoli will tell you how to eat it." And so there's a whole chapter on listening to your gut and your heart. And so Neil, my husband, will say, I don't think the lead works here. And I think it really gets going into the second paragraph. And I have to decide if he's right. And sometimes I think he's half right.
mm.
And that half of my first paragraph is good, but I did this throat clearing instead of just going to it and saying, this is, the topic sentence for nonfiction that you learn in high school and college. This is kind of what I'm going to be writing about. Got a minute? That's what you're saying to your reader. Got a minute? And so I really listened to my broccoli. My writing students at Book Passage used to always give me broccoli stuff, like broccoli refrigerator magnets, and in one case, a sterling silver broccoli brooch. But you just have to learn to trust your own instincts. The thing is, if you give me your work, if you give me 1,000 words to read, and I am not comfortable with your first page. I think it really starts in the third sentence at the top of the second page, and you give it to Sam, and he feels the same way, then you got to really consider it. Then, there was a great advice of Jessica Mitford, who wrote The American Way of Death. Brilliant, brilliant woman from England, yeah. She said famously, you have to kill your little darlings and you have to go through the work, and everything that you think is just so precious and literary and erudite and pyrotechnic, you just have to lose because it's interfering with you telling me a story. You're going to tell me a story, right? And you're going to make me care. And those are your only two directives. Tell me a story, make me care. And you have somebody who suggests something and you think about it. You don't cut them off. I mean, I hate criticism. And when somebody, even if Neil says, oh, or my other friend, I really don't think the lead works. And my feelings are always hurt and I kind of turn on them. And then I'm just so deeply relieved they told me the truth. But it's their truth. And this is my material. And I get to decide what stays and what goes. So for a beginning writer, I mean, over and over and over again, you just keep sitting at the feet of the masters. You read and you read and you read. You read stuff that might be similar in some way to yours. It might be autobiographical fiction. It might be historical fiction. It might be, but you read how other people did it and you study it and you write it, like my dad said, in your own voice, but you see how people get it to work. There's only 5 plots. You're not going to come up with a plot that hasn't been done, 15 million times since we started writing on papyrus. But yeah, you need to study how, like classically, this is kind of dumb and probably beneath our listeners, but how do you get time to pass, right? Well, in the 40s and 50s movies, which worked for me, the hands of the clock spin, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
there's an open window and the pages of the daily calendar fly out the window, right? You can't do that. And so how do people that you love, how does Barbara Kingsolver do it? How did Yeats do it? How did Hemingway do it? How did Muriel Spark do it? Well, the old dog's fur grew gray, or the writer's hair grew gray, or you lose an inch in height at around 60, or you somehow figure out that there are many, many ways that other people have done it, and something will come to you. So, it's partly about trying things that don't work. And then every time you have a false start, it gets you a little bit closer to what might just work.
Mm-hmm. And getting back to that perfectionism, how do you know when it's time to stop editing? How do you know when you're
Mm.
done?
Uh, I think there's a point at which, and this again goes back to listening to your broccoli and trusting your intuition, but there's a point at which the perfectionism begins to hurt the work. It's not positive in any way at all anymore. That's when I give it to someone to read, and then I get the edit back. I usually don't give it to people a second time because, it's my problem. And I do have this perfectionism, and I really work it, and then I do it when I'm exhausted. I feel it's time to send it to my editor. You know what? I go over it one more time and I get very quiet. I really love to edit on paper. That's kind of a final draft for me, is on paper, because there's just something so spiritual and so physical about that sound of paper and the graphite pencil scritching across it. I was teaching my grandson's writing classes, his little ones, like kindergarten starting, and sometimes I just give them pencils and blank paper, and I'd have them pretend to be scribbling across the page so they could understand that this is a sound that unites us for thousands of years, and the motion that you're moving across the page with an object that is capturing what's going from your head, through your neck, down your shoulder, through your arms, and out your fingers. And so for my last draft, I often print it out, and I'm alone with the cat and the door is closed. And I go over it really word by word at that point. And then I take a long, quavery, deep breath and I send it off. And then I just feel sick to my stomach with anxiety that it's not any good and that it's just dog shit. And that my editor is going to feel like, oh no, she's had a stroke or something. She can't write anymore. How are we going to get out of the contract? Every single time. And then I do what we do in recovery. I pick up the 200-pound phone, or I go for a walk, or I read poetry, or I do what we do.
Bird by Bird is just such an amazing book. It's just a gem. Is there anything about it that you would add to or revise a little bit now, all these years later?
That's a good question. Well, I wrote it when we were all writing on typewriters, so I think that probably I could, one thing with the computer, I used to talk about this 30 years ago when people started using computers, is that you could really easily make it look like it was good and that it was a really presentable manuscript. And that was hurting people because what they needed to do was to go, when I was coming up in the, 50 years ago, there was this thing called putting it through the typewriter again. And no matter where, and we were making copies with carbon paper, but you put it through the typewriter again. You took your manuscript, you'd marked it all up, you had ideas, you had cuts, you had additions, you had question marks, and you did it again. And it was a drag, and it might take another month, and you just did it because everybody did it. So, if there was a way for me to get people to print out a drafts and edit on paper and write on paper, that's the only thing I would change. But oh wait, there was one more thing I was thinking of that. Oh, I wrote a very short chapter on writer's block in Bird by Bird, in which I mostly wrote about it from the point of view of it not being a block so much, but it being an emptiness inside, that you've just used up everything and that you need to spend a week or so, a couple weeks filling back up. And I always imagine there's this kind of ragbag guy in my center or my soul or my solar plexus, and I'm gathering the rags for the ragbag, little Dr. Seuss ragbag guy, to put the quilt of my material together for me. And so I would just consciously be gathering, bits of burlap or unbleached muslin and satin and velvet and cotton and weird strings and ribbons and dental floss to stitch it all together. And I would just stop trying to force it. But I actually did a talk. I do a lot of talks at a writingroom.com. And I did a book, Bird by Bird book club there that was 5 weeks. And I got to really, really go in depth, into a fifth of the book at a time for an hour and a half. And that was really luxurious because you don't have that with writing. It's like, can you pick up the pace here? But I did a whole hour and a half on writer's block because I understood that it was just so demoralizing for people. It just is crippling for people's soul and spirit and writer's heart to get stuck like that. And so at this, I don't know what you would call it. It wasn't quite a seminar, but it was just an hour and a half on writer's block. I talked about actions you can take. Like, figure it out is not a good slogan at that point, right? But what you can do simple things. I mean, I can't remember the whole hour and a half right now, but you can jump ahead, right? You could jump ahead 20 pages because you're not stuck there. Either it doesn't exist or you haven't seen it for a while and you're not bored by it and you're not trashing yourself for that having been the best you could do. Or, I mean, I had like 6 of them. I won't be able to think of them right now. You can add a character
Mm,
suddenly, you just introduce a new person and they come in like a new person in your life does, and they kind of whip things up a little. But I think I would have added everything I talked about at that workshop to bird by bird, because it's just a devastating feeling to get there, and we all do, and we all have, and we all
yeah.
will again. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mm. You talked about gathering things, and it reminded me, I heard you once say that you, take notes, that you have your back pocket with an index card, I think, and you take notes, and I was wondering what are in all those notes? And how do you organize them once you have
Uh,
them?
uh, well, I know not very many people are looking at this and they're mostly listening, but I can just hold up what they look like, and they're all over the place. Some of them are napkins. I write some on the back of envelopes that are at church to put your money in. And because if you're open for business, I'm a writer now. Are you writing? Yeah, I'm writing 4 days a week for an hour every. Okay, well, then you're a writer, so you're open for business. And if you are, ideas are going to come to you and they're going to float into your head like goldfish. And they're not going to be at convenient times when you're at your computer or your desk. Now, all my students have always said, well, we have our phone. And I always say, look, thank you. Well, you can't get your phone out in certain circumstances, but you can get an index card or a bit of paper and a pen out. And it's what writers have always done, And I say, if you want what we have, which is skills and a little toolbox for writing, do what we've always done. We scribble, we carry small notebooks in our back pocket. You can use your phone. I don't know how that translates into what we've always done, which is gathering, gathering, gathering. And then people say, what do you do with your notes? Well, you can see they're right here by in fact, I was looking for this one. And they're, and because I'm giving a talk. And and they're here. And if I write them down with pencil or pen, they're indelible. You write down so much on your phone with texting and notes and whatnot, it's not indelible to me. But if I write it, it's coming through my head, my shoulders, my arms, my heart, through into my fingers, and I put it down on paper and I make indents on paper. It's indelible. And then I start to write something and I remember, oh yeah, oh yeah, I've got something. I found a way to describe that exact uh, situation or that exact person or that sound or that smell. I wrote it down and then I just go find it.
Yeah. One of my listeners wanted to know, your books, many of them are so personal. Like, how do you find the courage to be so personal in your writing? And are there things, like, are there boundaries? Do you hold some things back? How do you approach that kind of writing?
Oh, well, I hold a lot back, in anything that I write about anyone in my family, I run by them first. But one of the things I've always taught in my workshops and classes is write what you'd like to come upon, so that if you love poetry or if you love historical novels or if you love journals, which I happen to love, if you love, memoir, if you love fantasy, and when you read that, when I get into a book that I really like, I am not kidding. This little thing inside my soul goes, ooh, ooh, because it means I'm covered for a week. I've got a book I'm going to get in bed with every night. And and it means I'm found. Get lost a lot during the day and I get found. And so if that experience happens most often with thrillers or mysteries or cozies, Agatha Christie, try to write one because it's information from your soul. But I don't write anything that would embarrass my family or that they would be upset about. And all through those years of book passage, people were always telling me or writing about parents who had made them go pick out a switch from the backyard with which they were going to be hit and punished. And then they didn't want to write about it. Oh, my dad's really old now. I think he feels bad. I was like, tough shit, you know? And I've always said, if people wanted you to write more warmly about him, they should have behaved better. But you don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. I had a young Asian student whose mother used to hold his hand over the burner to punish him. And he had a scar there. And it was mostly for like bad grades. And I said, you know, and he said, I love my mother though, and she's old and blah. And I'd say, well, maybe it happens to the family across the street. Maybe it's not in your Japanese family. Maybe it's the Catholics with the 8 children instead of just the one. And you use fiction and you there are really, really ways to use everything that ever happened to you. It's really yours.
And it sounds like you think it can help other people to have it out there.
Well, I think it's medicine. You know, it's like Rumi, the Persian mystic, said, through love, all pain will turn to medicine. And as a lifelong reader who found literal and spiritual salvation in chapter books at about 4, um, the stories people have told about their own struggles and challenges, their own terrible self-esteem and grandiosity and wounds, and told them in a way that captivated me or maybe illuminated the world for me, illuminated my own challenge, my own hero's journey, or made me laugh out loud. That was my medicine. And that is definitely something I do try to provide.
Yeah, I think you do. Of
Thank
your book,
you.
yeah, no, of your book, let's set aside Bird by Bird for a minute because we all love that one. But other than that, what is your favorite book of yours that you've written?
But probably I love the last one somehow because it's all about love and it's funny and I think it's really deep. I really wanted to write a book to leave for Sam and his son, Jax, for when I'm gone. There was every single thing I knew about life and truth that would help them get whatever difficult future lies ahead of them. So I love that. But Sam and I wrote a book, a follow-up to operating instructions called Some Assembly Required, and operating instructions was subtitled "A Journal of My Son's First Year," and Some Assembly was subtitled "A Journal of My Son's First Son." And
Hmm.
so he wrote a lot. He didn't, I mean, I wrote most of it, but he wrote about a third of it. And God, if I read it to you right now, you would burst out laughing. And it's just painful too. You'd grip your stomach and you go, oh, I know exactly how he felt. And it's a lot about me learning that it was learning to let go of control and realizing that the parents are really not interested in what the nice old grandmother thinks about, you know, the child's nutrition or sleep habits or education, and that the more often you share them, the less you see the grandchild. So I love that book. I mean, I really love a lot of them, and uh but those two come to mind somehow. And some assembly required. I have, and they both have somehow some in the title, but
Hmm.
yeah. I think if
Interesting.
people feel really scared and desperate and or something really bad has happened, that Stitches is not a bad book to pick up. It's on healing and restoration. And my whole spiritual journey, which is very funny and dark and deep and, you know, kind of rotted out by my alcoholism, is all in Traveling Mercies. So those are some books your listeners might be interested in.
Hmm. I find after revisiting your work and now talking with you, I feel like if I could just move in with you, I'm pretty sure I
Oh,
could write whatever I wanted to write.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
think the writer's retreat is probably the next best thing, probably the most possible thing. And
yeah.
is there time for writing at the retreat? Do students do a lot of writing there, or is it just all talks?
Well, they did at the 2 I've been to before, and one of the things of a writingroom.com is the daily prompts and the sharing it with other people. And the one we did at the Indian Valley campus and one we did in Santa Fe, there was a lot of writing involved. And then they're all banding together afterwards and going to coffee houses or going to someone's room and they're writing for a couple of hours and then they're giving it to one another. But yeah, it's It's pretty intensive, and it's pretty joyful. The retreat, and my editor is there this year. His name's Jake Morrissey, and he's done my last 10 books. And so the students get to talk with him and share their work with him, and then he just tells them what to do. So then they go out and they have meals together, and they write down what Jake said and what they're supposed to do, and then they do it. Because you know why? Because they have support. Because they're sitting in a little ring together, and they're all on the same page, and they're all sort of excited by what they've heard, and by meeting, like Cheryl Strait will be there, and you know, God, Marlon James, and Jake is also Marlon's editor. So there's just like an energy, because you know, the what I just want to reiterate, I know we have to go in a second, but you sit at your desk alone. You know, you sit there alone with all the bad feelings that you might still have about yourself, all the stuff people told you about yourself that might be critical, all the inner critic stuff that tells you not to even bother, not to try that. It's never going to happen. What's the point if you don't get published? Well, most people aren't going to get published and make a lot of money, but they could have really rich lives as writers their whole life, get their stories told and get it published somehow or other. And you sit there, and it's just tough. It's a hard choice to make, to be a writer, and that's what any collective will give you, is to help you just want it more. You know, like in the spiritual, the Christian mystical tradition, they say don't pray for the food, pray for the hunger. You know, and a collective can make you really hungry to it's like being a monk. You're going to get a couple hours of work done every day, and you're going to join with the other monks once a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever. And so it's just like energy and movement, and other people's friendly eyes, and other people who think you're really good. Maybe your mother is worried that you don't seem to have an agent, but the people at the table at dinner could care less. They just think that you're really entertaining, and they can't wait to see what you come up with.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. So it is October 25th through 27th in Hollywood, California. And one thing I really liked too is it looks like there's a really well organized online component too. So if you
Yeah,
can't make it there
yeah,
in person, you can, it sounds like
yeah,
it's like really thoughtfully designed so
yeah,
that you can feel like you're participating
yeah,
too.
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you can watch it online and listen online and participate and chat online. Are you coming?
I can't come in person. That's why I'm excited about the online part.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So just tell everyone to go to awritingroom.com. It's not the writing room, who are our mortal enemies. It's awritingroom.com, and then they'll see you there, and they'll definitely see me there.
Yeah, and they actually, in your people, they gave me an affiliate code so people who are listening can get 10% off too. So when you sign up, if you use the code Grammar Girl 10, that's Grammar Girl 10. So go to awritingroom.com, sign up, and then use the code Grammar Girl 10, and we'll put that in the show notes so you don't have to write
Okay,
write it down.
okay.
Then you'll get 10% off too. So that'll be wonderful. And if you go to that page, also, there's a place you can sign up to get freebies. So Anne, I signed up for your writing prompts, and
Yeah, the prompts. Yeah,
I
yeah.
watched your wonderful 30-minute writing prompt video. It was great. So everyone should go there and get the free stuff and at least check out the conference. And then if you can go, use my code Grammar Girl
Yeah.
10 to get 10% off. And again, that's in late October, and it's awritingroom.com.
.com.
Yeah.
Uh,
And it's been just fabulous to talk with you.
Thank
Thank you.
you so much. I loved it. It actually makes me feel like writing.
Yeah, me
Having
too.
talked to you, right? So maybe we'll both write a little today.
This afternoon.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, enjoy your writing time.
Thank you so much for having me.
You bet.